Yesterday, Vancouver Canucks president Jim Rutherford held a press conference addressing the current state of the organization and kind of giving Canucks fans a little bit of an update as to what they can expect moving forward. Now, usually when things like these take place, I don't really pay much attention to it because presidents and general managers, they don't really like to give much insight into what they're actually thinking. They pretty much just say a lot of words without really telling us anything. However, in this particular press conference, that was definitely not the case, as Jim Rutherford was really open and honest about everything and just really blunt about the current state of the Canucks. He made some really interesting quotes that I want to give my thoughts on in this video. The entire press conference was, I believe, over 40 minutes long, so of course I'm not going to break down the entire thing, just some of the key points that I wanted to give my thoughts on. If you guys enjoy this type of NHL content, then be sure to hit that subscribe button. I'm trying to hit 100,000 subscribers in 2023, so every subscription counts. So with that being said, let's get into this. Jim Rutherford actually came out and did shoulder a lot of the blame for kind of the mess the Vancouver Canucks are currently in. He said that he's disappointed with the job that he has done up until this point as Canucks president, and at one point he was the interim general manager. He said initially that he thought the team would need minor surgery and now views it as a major surgery, which obviously means roster surgery, which means changes. And the move that initially popped into my mind when Jim Rutherford said that he's disappointed with the job he has done up until this point, obviously the big one is the JT Miller contract extension and the decision to extend him before Bo Horvat, which is now likely going to lead to Bo Horvat either leaving in free agency or being traded at the deadline so the Canucks can get something in return. Jim Rutherford also would make some comments regarding the contract negotiations between the Vancouver Canucks and Bo Horvat, and again, like I said, he was really open and honest about this kind of thing, basically saying that he believes the Vancouver Canucks have taken their best shot at Bo Horvat with the offer they have on the table right now, and he thinks it's fair value for what Bo Horvat has done up until this year. Notice how he said up until this year. Rutherford also said that he feels like the team's a little bit of a pickle because Bo Horvat obviously is having the best season of his career so far in a contract year, and what I'm getting from that is the Vancouver Canucks and Rutherford don't want to just throw a massive extension at Bo Horvat just because of what he has done this season. They kind of want to give him an offer for what he has done in his career up until this point as a whole, and from the point of view of the Vancouver Canucks front office, obviously that makes sense, but if you're Bo Horvat and his agent, that's not how things work. If you're a player having the best season of your career and you're scheduled to hit the open market in the summer, you want to cash in on that, because if the Vancouver Canucks aren't going to give Bo Horvat the kind of money that he wants and thinks he deserves, then there's likely going to be a team out there in free agency that is going to be willing to overpay a little bit. So it sounds like the most likely outcome out of all this is Bo Horvat is traded before the deadline, which I honestly believe is in the Canucks' best interest. If you can't get him signed to an extension, which it doesn't sound like they're going to be able to work that out, he's the kind of player you absolutely cannot risk losing and getting no compensation. And if I'm being honest, even if Bo Horvat wanted to stay in Vancouver and was open to signing an extension if they could find the right price, I still think it would be in the Canucks' best interest moving forward to cash in on his value being at an all-time high right now. I think you could get an absolute haul for Bo Horvat at the deadline, which now kind of leads me into my next key point that I wanted to touch on, and that is Jim Rutherford saying all of the core players aren't going to end up being here. Now, Rutherford didn't elaborate on who he views as the core players, but we can probably get a general idea. Pettersson, Hughes, Horvat, JT Miller, also I would throw Brock Besser in there, and you have to imagine that Quinn Hughes and Elias Pettersson are untouchables and likely aren't going anywhere, so I kind of want to take them out of the equation and really just focus on JT Miller, Bo Horvat, and Brock Besser. I think maybe you can throw Connor Garland in there as well, just because he's on a pretty sizable contract, and obviously I just gave my thoughts on Bo Horvat. I think he's as good as gone. I don't see any scenario where he is a Vancouver Canuck past this season, so that could be what Jim Rutherford means in terms of all the core players aren't going to be here. When it comes to JT Miller, I'm sure the Canucks would like to move him at this point, but considering everything that's gone on with JT Miller this season and the fact that his 7-year, $56 million extension does not kick in until next season, I don't really think that would be an easy player to move. With the narrative around JT Miller right now, that might even be a guy you'd have to add valuable assets to just to get rid of that contract, and I don't think that makes sense for the Canucks to do, so I really can't see JT Miller going anywheres. Now, Brock Besser is definitely a player that I expect to get moved at some point. There was already a lot of trade speculation regarding Brock Besser when he was set to be healthy scratched a month or so ago, whenever that game was. He's having a down season as a whole with just 9 goals. He's a guy who has scored at a 30-goal pace before. We know what kind of finishing ability he has. So Brock Besser is definitely one of those core guys that I think Rutherford could be talking about when saying they aren't going to be here. Now, Brock Besser is still signed for 2 more seasons after this one at about a $6.6 million cap hit, so this isn't a deal that the Canucks have to rush. I could see a trade involving Brock Besser happening in the offseason, if not at this year's deadline. Rutherford also gave an update regarding Andrei Kuzmenko, who the Canucks signed in the offseason to a 1-year deal, brought him over from the KHL, and that deal has obviously turned out to be fantastic, as Kuzmenko has been one of the Vancouver Canucks' better and more consistent forwards this season. Rutherford said that the Canucks and Kuzmenko have started negotiations and that the Canucks hope to retain him, which obviously makes sense given the way he's played this season. Now, the last quote by Rutherford that I want to touch on is something that a lot of Canucks fans are not happy about, and that is Rutherford saying, "We're not looking towards a rebuild. I'd rather call it a retool. My preference when we make these deals is not necessarily for draft picks that may come in and help the team 4 to 5 years from now. I'd prefer to get younger NHL players that maybe didn't work out in their entry-level contract and, bring them in and give them a second chance." So that is something that the majority of the Canucks faithful did not want to hear. It does sound a lot like something Jim Benning would say, who was obviously the previous general manager, and we know how his tenure with the Canucks went. I think maybe the reason why the Canucks keep finding themselves in this situation and just cannot win consistently is because they never fully commit to a rebuild and always try to kind of retool things on the fly. So that is pretty much everything that I wanted to touch on that Jim Rutherford said in his press conference yesterday. Again, he was really open about everything, just kind of spilled all the beans, which I feel like if you're a Canucks fan, even if you didn't necessarily agree with a lot of the things he said, you do have to appreciate his honesty. I'm really interested to hear your guys' thoughts on all this, especially if you're a Vancouver Canucks fan. How do you feel about the things Jim Rutherford said? Do you have any predictions on who some of the core players that may be moved out could be? One thing's for sure, it definitely does sound like there are big changes coming to the Vancouver Canucks organization sooner rather than later, and as an outsider, somebody who isn't a Canucks fan, doesn't really have an emotional attachment to this team, that is exciting because I love maximum chaos. I want to see big trades, so I'm really interested to see how this whole thing plays out. But if you enjoyed this video breaking down Jim Rutherford's press conference from yesterday, then be sure to drop a like on it. That is the best way to show your support. And if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want more NHL content just like this all year long, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and also be sure to go out and check out my second channel, which is linked at the top of the description. It's basically just for more NHL content, just in shorter form, 1 to 3 minute clips, that kind of thing. I've been uploading pretty much every day over there and really enjoying doing it. So if that's something that interests you, be sure to go check that out, and I'll talk to you all soon.